Hello, my name is Ian Kinder of Live Safe Academy, the owner and the founder. I'm here today with Joseph Ferreira, who is now a retired sergeant from a local police department in the Detroit metro area. And we're here with Real Encounters, episode number 4. And what I always want to stress with these episodes is that we're never here to second guess the people who are involved in these incidences. We just want to use this as a visual reference to teach principles to help you, the viewer, to be safe. So, Joe, thank you very much, and welcome to this episode of Real Encounters. This is the first time that I've had the pleasure of you being a part of this series.
Well, thank you, Ian, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Well, for those who would like to learn more about Joe's background, if you listen to our podcast series, podcast number 2, Human Factors, that podcast is where we first introduced Joe, and he goes into his background. But, Joe, what we're going to do right now is we're going to talk about that video clip that we just saw. Now, you've got an extensive background in both law enforcement and martial arts, so you've got a perfect set of credentials to comment on these issues. And if you can just kind of give us your first thoughts on what the viewers need to be aware of.
Well, you know, as I reviewed the video, I noticed that the victim, if you will, obviously the shop owner or employee, initially appears to go for his gun when he realizes that the suspect coming around the corner of the rack has a gun in his hand. But then he aborts that. Somewhere in his brain decides, no, there's not enough time to get to my gun. I'm going to attack any-ish configuration up in a physical confrontation where he gets pistol whipped and knocked to the floor. There's another customer or employee, we're not sure which, on the other side of the rack, and what the two assailants do is they end up going around there. The next video, part of the video, it looks like it's been edited. The employee is getting up and he draws his weapon and he makes it function. I'm not sure if he didn't have a round chambered or if he had a stoppage of some sort, but he gets the gun back in action, and from there it goes downhill. Neither the suspect nor the victim have any type of shooting capabilities at all. They're literally throwing bullets around the shop as two more suspects start to enter the building from the outside based on that view from that camera. And again, it's not a good situation. You've got the bad guy just whipping the gun out and throwing bullets downrange, no aiming, no whatever. And then you've got the victim who's in some kind of reach over the display rack combat stance. I'm being facetious. And he starts launching bullets in the general direction. Obviously, if there were any innocents in the building, either one of them could have hit them. There was the other person. I believe he's wearing a black hoodie. I don't think he's involved in it, but I think he was one of the customers or employees to start with. Luckily, he didn't get hit by either the owner or the suspect, and it's not good. It's not good from the get-go.
Well, let me mention a couple of things that I saw, and then please give your input on that. You know, in that initial point when he realized that there were assailants there and that they were armed with a gun, he immediately engaged, which was the one aspect I would give him to his credit, because anytime you're confronted with a threat, you have an immediate choice: do you engage or do you disengage? And that question, disengaging, really wasn't an option because he was trapped in that kill funnel. Had they started to shoot, there's no way for him to maneuver. So to go directly in was a good thing. But then you bring up a great point. Even if we're armed, oftentimes, if the weapon's not in our hand when the assault happens, which is usually, because most assaults are spontaneous, sudden and unexpected, you're not going to be able to deploy the weapon fast enough to be your first option. Now, obviously, there are times when you can do that, but there are also times when you can't. And if you don't have unarmed combat skills, you're not going to have a way to respond in time, because our body and our minds are the only things that we take with us everywhere we go, and they're the fastest things that we can deploy. So even if we're carrying a gun, we have to have unarmed combat skills. The more realistic our fighting skills are, the better we are, the more capable we are at deploying those fighting skills, the better off we are. But my quick comment is that he engaged right away, which I think was the right thing to do. But it also illustrates the need that even if you're armed, you need to have more than gun skills. You need to have unarmed combat fighting skills too. And Joel, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, you make a good point that he engages right away, so he's not I hate to use the term coward. He's not afraid to engage him, and that's great. But the second half of your point is also important. He didn't have a plan. So yeah, he decided, I'm going to attack, but he didn't know what to do. I mean, bear hugging is not a technique. It's something that Uncle Bob does to you at the Christmas party once a year. It's not what you do to an armed assailant who's coming in to rob you or kill you or both. So yes, he was very courageous in that he charged, but he didn't know what to do once he got there. So, and obviously his gun skills, we can tell from the video, his gun handling skills are lacking also. So, you know, had he disengaged to create distance to draw his gun and start shooting, in either case, he did not have any tools in his toolbox to deal with the situation. Yeah, he had a gun, but he didn't really know how to shoot it. Yeah, he was courageous and he charged forward at his attacker, but he didn't know what to do once he got there. We both know that knees and elbows would have been a great set of tools to use on this guy. You know, start ringing his bell, maybe you know a rising forearm or elbow strike to the chin, a good punch or strike to the trachea, something usable. But just throwing your arms around him, especially when he's got a gun in his hand, is not necessarily a great idea. So he was courageous, but he didn't have tools in the toolbox in either direction, hands-on or firearms. So he needs more training, in my humble opinion.
And you know, one of the things that we see in these encounters always is the immediate weapon focus by both parties. They're fighting over the weapon, and either party that would shift their focus from the weapon to the other person would be the person who would start to advance their circumstance. Two other points that I just want to bring out to the viewers. Because he had a gun, oftentimes, and when we look at violence, we tend to see patterns. Now, in any individual event, obviously there can be unique things that happen there. But when you look at violence, you tend to see patterns. A common reaction when somebody starts shooting is that the criminals start running. Now, that's no guarantee, but the reason why I bring that up is, had he not had a gun, those criminals would have never probably disengaged. So I just want the viewers now to think about this for a second. Gun ownership is a deeply personal decision, and I would never say to people, yes, you should own a gun. That I respect the fact that that's a decision each individual has to make on their own. But we do have to be honest about the fact that if he had not had a gun, he probably would not have survived that scenario. Those criminals would not have disengaged. He was outnumbered 4-1, and multiple of those assailants had guns. The only way he was going to survive is with that gun. And Joe, you and I both know, because we're martial artists ourselves, there are many martial artists that we are very close friends with, that we have deep respect for, that have been training for decades, but that aren't armed with a gun. And again, that's a personal choice, but you got to ask yourself, if you look at the statistics, particularly for males, they're probably going to have male assailants trying to kill them with a weapon. And in many of those encounters, the only way you're going to be able to realistically have a chance to stop that from happening is if you're armed yourself. And I always like to point out to people, Joe, that any criminal that law enforcement deals with, the public deals with first and more often. And cops would never engage criminals without the benefit of a gun. So now, as a private citizen, you have to think to yourself, why would I want to fight that criminal without a gun, for those times that the use of a gun was truly justified and necessary? What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I agree. And to look at the actual incident itself, and I hate to keep harping on this, but it's true, for our viewers, it's great to have a gun. But if you don't have not just the technique of shooting the gun, but the tactics of how to use a gun in an encounter, you're not going to do well. Let's face it, whether he went hands-on properly or he went to his gun properly, it should have ended with people being shot. I agree with you that many times bad guys are cowards. When bullets start flying, they start running. But if you watch the video, one of the last things the bad guy does as he runs out the door is he extends his arm behind him and fires a few more shots as he's running out the door, because he's trying to scare the other person also. My point that I'm trying to make is, have the proper tools in your toolbox and know how to use them. If you're going to engage physically, disable, or in this case, because it is such a violent encounter, disable the bad guy, render his appendages unoperable or inoperable, or unconscious or dead, period. In a deadly force encounter, the key is make them stop doing what they're doing. He doesn't do that, and I'm not, again, we're being analytical, we're not being critical. He's just the everyday shop owner just trying to run his business. But if you're gonna decide to engage somebody, people, know how to do it, be it hands-on, be it with a pocket knife, be it with a handgun. Just spraying bullets around didn't end the battle and didn't stop the bad guy from shooting back as he was running away. And how awful would it be to have that guy on the run out the door and one of his random shots goes right between your eyes and it's done and you've lost the encounter now. So the key is, it's not enough just to study, Bob's Kung Fu system or whatever it is. Make sure that the system you're studying is applicable to a real fight on the street, like you said earlier, a spontaneous encounter. If it's a pocket knife skill, make sure you know how to disable somebody quickly so that they're out of the fight. If it's a handgun skill or a long gun skill, hit the doggone target so that they're no longer a threat to you, your customer, other people in the area. I'll try a little bit of tackle, I'll spray and pray a little bit with my gun, just doesn't cut it. That's not responsible on your part. Again, my point, if you're going to study a martial art, there's great, artistic forms of martial arts you can study, but actually study a martial science. Actually study true self-defense, be it with your hands, a pocket knife, or a gun. Think about the actual combat application and how you're going to use it. If that's your store, you should already have played out visual training where you just sit and think about, if a bad guy comes in the door like this is what I'm going to do. If a bad guy's standing at my pop cooler and all of a sudden he turns around with a gun, this is what I'm going to do. You visualize the possibilities so that your schema, your plan of action, is good to go when it happens and you don't hesitate.
Absolutely, and the key point that you're making there is that the tool is not adequate. You have to have the skill to effectively use that tool. And how many folks have weapons, and in their mind that's a magic totem that automatically keeps them safe. But the reality is we have to have the skill to fight with those weapons. And so it's not just enough to have the weapon. And what are the two things that people overestimate the most? How much time they're going to have and what their ability will be. And so it's very critical that we always train fighting skills, and we train them under and for realistic conditions. And Joe, I know you do this, and we do this here at Live Safe Academy. We actually go into businesses, and I've been into many businesses, including party stores, where we've trained their staff on site in the facility where we role play assailants, and then not only are we teaching them the skills, but then we're putting them into the work environment under conditions where they're going to have to deploy the skills to kind of bridge that gap so that they're going to be more functional in a real event. And we always say training and real violence are never the same, obviously, and we don't pretend that they are, but you can do things in training that are much closer to a real event that are then a better means of preparation. Let me kind of point out my final thought here, Joe, and then you can add whatever your final thoughts are. Another big thing that we see is the pop the weasel over barricades. And you see this a lot in party stores because a lot of times these things happen at the counter. In this case, it happened in the aisle. But there's a barricade there, and this guy shoots over the barricade, then he ducks as this guy shoots over the barricade, then he ducks as this guy shoots over the barricade. But what they're hiding behind isn't bulletproof. Now, we never, ever, ever shoot at anything that we don't have 100% visual identification of. That's our responsibility as gun owners. We don't shoot at sounds, we don't shoot at silhouettes, we don't shoot at movement. But in that kind of close and violent encounter, you know what's on the other side of that barricade because you're in a life and death fight with it. So if he would have just shot through the aisle, or for those people that are at the counter of a party store, shot through the counter itself, then he could be getting shots on target when the other person isn't shooting back. And the flip end of this is not only his tactic that he can put shots directly through the barricade, but what's the best way to stall the body? It's to stall the brain. And people oftentimes, not always because people do fire wild, but oftentimes if they don't see you, they're not shooting at you because they're looking for you so they have something to shoot at. So if you duck behind the barricade, they're doing this trying to see you and shoot over you, but you're shooting directly at them, and they may be hesitating, not firing at you where you're getting shots on target. So that ability to understand that barricade's not bulletproof. If you know what's on the other side, get shots on target. Why expose yourself over the barricade when you can just shoot through the barricade. Joe, what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I agree absolutely with you. And years ago when Simunitions came out, we were doing some training at my agency, and in one of the particular scenarios, one of the officers hid behind a piece of cardboard, and part of that is poor training because agencies use different objects on the range when people are qualifying as pretend cover. And one of the things that we used to use was a piece of cardboard. And so when he hid behind this piece of cardboard, I was the bad guy. I pulled out my firearm, and I thought, man, I got to break this habit right now. So I started shooting him through the cardboard. And, of course, he started screaming and going, whoa, whoa, what are you doing? I'm behind cover. And I'm like, it's cardboard. It's not cover. So your point is well made. People see a physical barricade. They see a physical object in their way, and they think, well, I have to shoot around it or over it, when, in fact, if you can maintain the presence of mind to think about it, maybe it's the best thing to be shooting through rapidly, getting multiple rounds on target, and that's going to obviously change the outcome of that fight. I can't emphasize enough for the people that watch this. Watch him as he runs out the door, the bad guy, and he lets just wildly throws his arm behind him and lets a couple of rounds fly, and it could have hit either the other employee, or if it was a customer, or the original victim, the store owner or manager employee himself. And it would be terrible to have them running away, shooting backwards, and seriously injure or kill someone when you should have put a stop to the fight right away.
And you and I did a podcast, Common Mistakes of Gun Owners, and one of the things that we pointed out is that gun responsibility is unlike other means of force because we are responsible for every life within the range of that bullet, and it's the power of life and death, whereas pepper spray, tasers, impact weapons, sharp weapons, unarmed combat, the only person who's in danger is that person that we're focusing our aggression on. That's not the case with guns. So I agree with you 100%, and I'm going to sum up here what I think are some important lessons, but please feel free to add what you think is important. He immediately engaged, which I say was a good thing because I think in that circumstance, disengaging would not have been an effective option. But what that tells you then is that regardless of what you carry for protection, you have to have effective unarmed combat skills, because if that weapon's not already in your hand, which it most often won't be because you'll be getting caught off guard, then you need to have those unarmed combat options. And you and I know people personally that have only survived because their immediate response was unarmed. They couldn't get to their weapon immediately. Even if the weapon ultimately solved the problem, it couldn't happen in time to be their first response. Now, the other thing there was we need to have effective fighting skills. So again, it's not just enough to have the weapon, but with any fighting skills that we use, we have to be able to employ those skills effectively. And when we're faced with a barrier between us, if that barrier is not bulletproof, as long as we know with certainty what's on the other side, we can shoot through the barrier to get shots on target. And I think the other important lesson there is, although gun ownership is a deeply personal choice, and I respect whatever decision people make in that regard, as a matter of being informed, there are many encounters where you will only survive if you're armed with a gun, and that's something to consider. And I guess one last thing I'll mention here too is that encounters almost always happen, as we both know, up close and personal, and usually spontaneous. And I think most people have the idea that they're not going to let the threat get that close, but of course a criminal is not going to identify themselves from 21 feet, hey, here I come. They're going to be right on top of you. And we all walk around strangers. We all walk around blind spots. And the only thing different from a criminal and every other stranger that we walk by is that fraction of a second right before they reveal their intentions, which they're not going to do until they're right on top of us. So that's kind of my conclusion, Joel, but if you have any thoughts, please add them.
No, I agree. And again, usable skills, not, don't daydream, don't dilly-dally, have a plan of action. Do some visualization training so that before it happens, especially if you're in a constant environment like your business, just pre-plan how you're going to handle situations as they arise. The proper planning prevents piss poor performance.
Joe, it's so great to have you as a part of this Real Encounter series. I'm really looking forward to, having you and Lou Kyoto, who I know you're a contemporary of. You both trained with Rex Applegate, and you're both good friends, and you're both men that I call teacher, and I'm so honored to have you both be a part of these series. I'm looking forward to having you do more of them. And I know you and I have already talked about it. We're going to get you and Lou in a common hangout like this, and we'll talk about some of your thoughts about point shooting and your experiences with Rex Applegate, and just kind of reminisce and have a round table. And I think that'll really be of interest and be very helpful for folks to do so. Joel, thank you so much for being a part of this. Viewers, thank you very much for watching this video. If you have any comments, please let us know. And we look forward to seeing you in the next episode of Real Encounters. Stay safe.
Thanks, Ian.
You're welcome, sir.
Would you like to connect with Live Safe Academy, LLC? Would you like to help us spread the word so we can help more people? Go to livesafeacademy.com/connect to join our email list, subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, subscribe to our YouTube channel, like us on Facebook. Get free safety information and learn more about our classes and premium online learning opportunities. Because you have the right to be safe, no one has the right to hurt you, and you are worth protecting.